I sold my house last spring. Not because I needed the money, I have enough money. I sold it because I couldn't stand the silence in the hallway anymore. 41 years I lived in that house. Raised 3 children inside those walls. And when I walked through it one last time before handing over the keys, I realized I could not remember a single conversation I had with any of them there. Not one. I am 97 years old. I have outlived my wife, one of my sons, and every version of myself I used to be proud of. What I am about to tell you is not a warning. Warnings are for people who still think they have time to be comfortable. This is a confession. And the only reason I am making it now is because I spent 8 decades refusing to. If you have children or a father, stay with me. Not because I will tell you something you don't know, but because you already know it, and you are doing exactly what I did. You are waiting. And I need you to understand what waiting costs. Not in theory. In rooms. In phone calls that get shorter every year. In a face you stop recognizing. I was not a violent man. I want to be clear about that, because men like me often hide behind it. I never raised my hand. I never screamed. I provided. That word provided, I used it like a shield for 50 years. I provided. As if money moving from my account into the household was the same thing as being present in it. My son Daniel was 7 years old when he had his first nightmare, bad enough to make him cry out. I heard him from the hallway. I stood outside his door for what I estimate was 4 minutes. I remember because I was counting, the way you count when you're waiting for something uncomfortable to end. Then I went back to bed and told myself his mother would handle it. She did. She always did. That was the arrangement I had built without ever discussing it with anyone. What I did not understand then, what I would not understand for another 40 years, was that Daniel was not just afraid of the dark that night. He was learning something. Children are always learning something, even when you think nothing is happening. What he learned that night, in those 4 minutes of silence outside his door, was the precise shape of his father's love. Conditional. Cautious. Unwilling to be inconvenienced. He never stopped loving me. That is almost worse. There was a school play in 1974. My daughter Ruth was 11. She had a single speaking line, one sentence, something about a river and the sea. I don't remember exactly, but she had practiced it in the kitchen every evening for 3 weeks. I know this because my wife mentioned it. I did not witness a single rehearsal. The night of the play I stayed late at the office finishing a report that, I promise you, no one remembers today. I sent flowers the next morning. Ruth kept them in her room until they turned brown. I thought that meant she was grateful. 12 years later, at her wedding, she asked her uncle to walk her down the aisle. Not me. Her mother's brother, a man who had taken her fishing twice and remembered the name of her first dog. I sat in the front pew in a suit that cost more than most people's monthly salary, and I smiled because I did not know what else to do with my face. People told me I looked proud. I was not proud. I was experiencing, for the first time, the specific pain of being a stranger to someone who shares your blood. I did not yet know what to call it. I told myself she was being dramatic. My youngest, Paul, stopped calling somewhere around 1991. Not dramatically. There was no argument, no door slammed, no moment I could point to. The calls simply became less frequent, then infrequent, then occasional, then gone. By 1993 we spoke twice a year. Christmas and my birthday. 4 minutes each time, maybe 5. Polite. The politeness was the worst part. You can survive anger. Politeness from your own child is a different kind of cold entirely. I was 64 years old and I had 3 children who were, in every way that mattered, strangers to me. And I was still telling myself I had provided. It was a Tuesday in February 1998. I remember the month because the heating in the bathroom had been broken for a week and the mirror used to fog up from the hot water, but that morning the water ran cold before I could finish and the mirror stayed clear. I was 68 years old. I stood in front of that mirror and I looked at my face the way you look at a face when you are really looking, not checking your hair, not adjusting your collar, just looking. I did not recognize the man looking back at me. Not in a poetic sense. I mean something more literal and more frightening than that. I stood there for a long time, long enough that the water dripped dry on my skin and I started to shiver, and I tried to find something in that face I could name as mine. Something chosen. Something that had come from the inside out rather than being shaped entirely by habit and avoidance and the path of least resistance. I could not find it. I had a thought, standing there. It arrived without drama, the way the most devastating things often do. The thought was, my children do not know this face either. And they stopped trying to. I sat down on the edge of the bathtub. The porcelain was cold through my trousers. I sat there for what must have been 20 minutes and I did not move. Not because I was broken. Because for the first time in 68 years I was actually, fully, quietly inside my own life. Looking at it without flinching. And what I saw was a man who had been so afraid of being inadequate that he had simply never shown up to be judged. That was the morning I decided to change. I was 68 years old. It was almost too late. It was not quite too late. That gap between almost and not quite is the only grace I was ever given, and I have tried to be worthy of it every day since. I have a name for what I was. Not a bad father. Not an absent father. Those words are too clean, too easy to reject. I was a withheld father. A man who had everything required to love his children well: time, health, intelligence, resources, and who held it back. Not out of malice. Out of fear so old and so deep I had stopped knowing it was there. Fear of being seen trying and still being found wanting. So I never tried. I provided instead. I built walls and called them foundations. The tool I want to give you is not a habit or a routine. It is a single question. Ask it about the people closest to you, ask it tonight, ask it without softening the answer: do they know me or do they only know my function? Not your job. Not your role. Not what you do for them. You. The specific, irreplaceable, frightened, hoping person underneath all of it. If the answer is no, and for many of you it will be no, then you are already doing what I did. You are already withholding. And the longer you wait, the more the distance hardens into shape, and the more it begins to feel like something that was always there rather than something you built, day by day, 1 4-minute silence at a time. I know what you are telling yourself right now. I told myself the same things for decades. That there will be time later. That they know you love them even if you don't say it. That you show it in other ways. That they are busy too. That it would be strange to suddenly change. That too much time has passed. I believed every one of those sentences with the full conviction of a man who needed them to be true. They are not true. Later is not a place. It is the story you tell yourself so you do not have to be uncomfortable today. I lived in later for 68 years. I know exactly what it looks like from the inside. It looks like a house full of silence. It looks like flowers kept until they turn brown. It looks like a front pew at your daughter's wedding, smiling at a ceremony you were not really invited into. You are not a bad person. Neither was I. But good intentions that stay inside you are indistinguishable, from the outside, from having none at all. I spoke to Daniel last month. He is 63 now. We talked for an hour and 40 minutes. I know because I watched the clock the way I used to watch it, waiting for uncomfortable things to end, except this time I was watching it hoping it would slow down. He told me about his garden. About a tomato plant that had taken over the left side of the fence. About his grandson's first word. I listened to every syllable like a man drinking water after a very long dry season. Before we hung up he said, "You're different, Dad." Not as a compliment exactly. As an observation. The way you'd note that the light had changed. "I know," I said. "I'm sorry it took so long." He was quiet for a moment, then, "It's okay. You got there. Understand something about that silence. It was not the house's fault. I built that silence. 41 years, one withheld moment at a time. I carried it room to room like furniture, and then one day I looked up and it had filled every corner. You still have time to choose differently. I am 97 years old, and I know this with the kind of certainty that only comes from having been wrong about it for most of a century. Don't wait for the mirror.